Alright, guys, and welcome back to the True Crime Lounge. If you are new here, hit that like button. I want you to comment something interesting about Jim Jones that you find interesting or someone you want me to talk about next. Subscribe and ring that bell for notifications. Now let's dive into part 3 of our Don't Drink the Kool-Aid series. And for those of you who want to go back and watch part 1 and 2, I do have that uploaded. I'm moving this one a little bit faster since I have a little bit of time. But anyway, according to the aftermath, early reports claim that 400 temple members have been killed and the remainder have fled to the jungle. This death count was revised over the next week around for the final to about 909 was reached. The sheer scale of the event, as well as Jones' socialist learnings, led some of to suggest CIA involvement. However, in 1980, the House Parliament Select Committee on Intelligence investigated that Jonestown was mass suicide and announced that there was no evidence CIA involvement at Jonestown. Most government documents relating to Jonestown remain classified. According to various press reports, surviving temple members in the U.S. announced their fears of being targeted by a hit squad of Jonestown survivors. Similarly, however, in 1979, the Associated Press reported that the claim of the U.S. congressional aide that there was 120 brainwashed assassins from Jonestown ready to the trigger were pick up their hit. So what about the legacy of Jonestown? Because you know there has to be a legacy, right? Well, Jonestown itself became a ghost town after 78 and was mostly destroyed by a fire in the mid-1980s. After which the ruins were left to decay. Today there remains little on the mark to the site where one of the most notorious suicides in history occurred. The buildings and grounds were not taken care of by local Guyanese police because the social stigma associated with the murders and murders and suicide. The Jonestown death, were among several incidents from 1978 to 1982, and this greatly undermined cults and new religious movements in the U.S. So, here's the official story. The first reports out of Guyana on November 18, 1978 were Congressman Leo J. Ryan and 4 other members in his party were shot and killed as they attempted their announcements that 408 citizens had committed suicide in a communal village that had been built in the jungle of West Guyana. The community had come to be known as Jonestown. The dead were all members of the group known as People's Temple, which was led by Reverend Jim Jones. It would soon be learned that 913 of the 1,100 people believed to be at Jonestown at this time had died in mass suicide. The article entitled Scared Too Long related to the death of Sam Houston's son, Bob, in October 1976. Houston had decided to speak out against his son's death because he believed that the reason Bob had died beneath the wheels of the train was because he had announced his decision to leave People's Temple the day before. Houston was also concerned that his 2 granddaughters, sent to New York for a vacation, had ended up in Jonestown, Guyana, and never returned. Over the ensuing 6 to 8 months, Ryan would hear more People's Temples through newspapers articles from direct request of assistance concerned family members, relatives, and that had disappeared into the Guyana jungle to join the Jonestown community. However, there were claims that security irregularities, human rights violations, and that people were being held against their will at Jonestown. In June of '78, Ryan read excerpts from a sworn affidavit by Debbie Blakey, a defector from Jonestown, which included claims that the community at Jonestown had on a number of occasions rehearsed for a mass suicide. After meeting a number of concerned relatives, Ryan's interest in the People's Temple became widely known, and reports about the group, both favorable and unfavorable, began to pour in. He had an attorney to interview former Temple members and the relatives of the members to determine whether or not there had been any violations of the federal and California state laws by the group. In September of '78, Ryan met with Byron P. Vakey and the other State Department officials to discuss the possibility of Ryan making a trip to Jonestown in Guyana. This request was made official on October 4th. Permission was granted and the trip was planned for the week of November 12th to the 18th. Ryan's intention to visit Jonestown soon became widely known, and the numbers wishing to accompany him had grown substantially. By the time of disappearance, there were 9 media people and 18 representatives of a delegation of concerned relatives who would go with him at his own expense. The official party, or Codell, consisted of Ryan, James Shelbert, Jackie Spearer, Ryan's personal assistant. In the days of preparation for the trip to Jonestown, Ryan contacted Jim Jones by telegraph to inform him of his intentions to visit the settlement. Though the U.S. embassy in Guyana, Ryan learned that the agreement for the visit was conditional. Ryan would have to ensure that Codell was not biased, there was no media coverage, and the visit Mark Lane, the People's Temple Council, would have to be present. On November 6th, Lane wrote to Ryan and informed him that he would not be able to attend at this time they wanted, and claimed that Codell was nothing more than a witch hunt against the People's Temple. Lane responded with a declaration and the intentions to visit the settlement anyway, and that he would be leaving on November 14th. Problems began for the group as they soon arrived in Guyana at midnight. Ron Havers, I think that's how you pronounce it, from the San Francisco Chronicle, was detained overnight at the airport as he did not have an entry visa. The group concerned relatives, despite having confirmed reservations, have spent the night in the lobby of the Pegasus Hotel in Georgetown because there were no rooms available for them. Over the next 2.5 days, Ryan met with the embassy personnel and organized a meeting with Ambassador Burke and concerned relatives. He and the members of the family members who attempted to speak with a representative of People's Temple at their headquarters in Georgetown, but could not gain entry. In addition, Ryan was unable to negotiate successfully with Lane or Gary, another legal representative of Jones Temple, resulting in the postponement of the scheduled flight mission until Friday. The negotiations were headway, so Ryan informed Lane and Gary that he and his parties would be leaving for Jonestown at 2:30 p.m. There were 2 seats on the plane. Lane and Gary wished to leave with them. The plane was scheduled at 2:30 on board with Ryan Spear, Sorry, I can't talk for some reason. Deputy Chief of Mission, Richard Dyer, Lane and Gary, all 9 media representatives, 4 media representatives, and concerned relatives. Neville Anaborn, representative of the Guyanese government. At the Port Port Katyn Strip, Corporal Rudder, the Guyanese regional officer of the Northwest District, met on the plane. His instructions from Jonestown were that only Lane and Gary were allowed to leave the plane. Negotiations were made which allowed entry into Jonestown and ensued between Ryan and Jonestown representatives who were at the airport. Eventually, it was agreed that all but one media representative could go. Gordon Lindsay, consulting for NBC on the story, was denied entry because of the article he had written in the past that criticized the People's Temple. Upon their arrival at Jonestown, if none of member had similar verbal requests to drive, both requests were reported to Ryan. At 11 o'clock p.m., the media and the family representative were returned to Port Katima as Jim Jones refused to allow them to spend the night on the compound. Ryan, Spear, Drew, Annaborn, Lane, and Gary were the only ones who spent the night on Friday, November 17th at Jonestown. Back at Port Katima, local there we go. Local, including one police officer who had told us stories of the beatings at Jonestown, approached media representatives. They complained that the Guyanese officials were denied entry to the compound and had no authority there. They also described the torture hold in the compound. The media and relatives were not returned to Jonestown until 11 o'clock a.m. the next day. Several hours later, Ryan had continued interviewing members since early that morning, during the time in which the individual told their desire to leave. By 3 o'clock p.m., there were a total of 15 Temple's members climbing into the trucks of delegation and drove to Port Katuma Airport. Ryan had intended to stay, but was attacked by a People's Temple member, Don Sly, with a knife. He was not hurt, but he was insisted that Ryan was with him. Drew insisted that Ryan was with them. He planned to return to Jonestown later to resolve a dispute with a family who was split on his decision to leave. The party arrived at Port Katima Airport about 4:30, but the two planes did not arrive until 5:10. The delay had caused them by an unexpected request of the U.S. Embassy for a second plane to carry 15 passengers. Soon after its arrival of 6 was loaded. So there was a time to die. Well, as Ryan's delegation was preparing to board the aircraft, Jim Jones called the Jonestown community together. He explained to them as if it was a premonition rather than a foreknowledge that someone on the plane was going to kill Ryan. The consequences of this action would be that those political forces have been trying to destroy Jonestown for the temple for years, and people at Jonestown. The enemy would descend upon them and kill them mercilessly. This was not a new threat to Jonestown, threat to the community at Jonestown. They had lived in fear of an unnamed enemy and destroyer for many years, nor was Jones' solution next to him. But he had been preparing them for what he had termed a revolutionary suicide for some time. A tape recording of the mass suicide that followed the dissent about the decision to die. One of two women who felt their children should be able to live protested, but they were soon reassured by reminders of alternative undignified deaths by the bands of the enemy. The poison-laced drink. The babies and small children, over 200 of them, were first with the poison poured into their mouths and syringes. As parents watched their children die, they swallowed the fatal potion. The moments before the final decision to die brought resistance from a few, but armed guards surrounded the room, shot many of them. Of the estimated 1,100 people believed to have been present at Jonestown at the time when 913 died. It is not certain whether Jones shot himself or was shot by an unknown person. The most puzzling question which had arisen out of the tragedy of Jonestown is how one man could achieve such control over a large group of people that will willingly die at his command. It was easy to assume that Jonestown was a unique situation that could have occurred because of Jones's dynamic and charismatic personality, combined with the weakness and vulnerability of his victims. Such analysis may bring some peace that a thing like this could happen, but it falls along the way with providing a true understanding of the situation, thereby leaving all vulnerable to the danger and tragedies of Jonestown. To properly understand Jonestown, it's necessary to explore the social and psychological process that was employed, which ensured that such extremes of social conformity and obedience would be achieved. The process, they are possesses that are commons in social groups. Processes that are common in social groups. But in instances like People's Temple, they were used in extreme with corresponding extreme results. Members of Temple have been trained for many years in readiness where mass suicide had finally occurred in November 78. Jim Jones has shared with the followers in paranoid belief that the American government was plotting to destroy anyone involved with Jonestown. Jones' followers were accustomed to looking for Jones to salvation. Over the next few years, Jones had introduced many outside threats to safety in his followers, but he had also removed the dangers of them. Time and time again, he had rescued them, and they learned to trust this man. They became known as Father. Jones and his followers moved to Jonestown with the vision to create completely self-sufficient community based on ideals and socialism. Each person would work for a common good, providing food, shelter, clothes, health care, and education for themselves. In the community, everyone would be equal and could live in peace. It was a noble ideal, one as many as would constantly remind him. By November 78, the people of Jonestown were ready to die. After many years of input, which has such actions, something to be aspired to, which no input negating such a belief to the People's Temple would have easily seen their own death and nobility as dignity. Alright, that is it for part 3. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have a awesome day and tune in for part 4.